and not just kicking them off. And I don't know, there might have been that analysis. Who knows? It's Wisconsin. But you know, when I say by that, I mean that there's some very critical voices in Wisconsin, and some not so critical voices in Wisconsin. It's hard to say. And then the other thing that I was going to say is, not only is it important to draw the direct lines to who is profiting, like to figure out, okay, well, you know, it's free advertising for the universities that are doing and the heat and whoever, but also to figure out how, as you were sort of alluding to, this is part of the landscape that allows, you know, the oppression of capitalism to exist, right? It's not, this is the reason that I think this is important is when people try to play it down of like, oh, this is just, it's not that big of a deal, it's just this one thing, whatever. It's like, if this was all it was, okay, then maybe we could say that, maybe we could still have a critical conversation, but maybe it wouldn't be a big deal, but the fact that it's part of a landscape of oppression, I think, is the important thing to say, is that we also need to understand how it allows the wider system of oppression that is a very profitable system to exist.
Any last comments? Okay, so we will open it up for comments, questions. We have one hand over here. So if I could take that mic, perfect, and then you can pass it around. Sure. Okay. And you don't have to stand. Do whatever you feel comfortable.
Hi. I have a question about the use of the phrase white privilege as a given. Now, is it really a phrase that you use to bully your connections, to get into your connections and color, to get and do whatever you want to?
I can answer that, maybe. I'll defer to you.
The phrase white privilege.
I think
you say it as a given.
Yeah, I would say that it is a given. Just by the very nature of being white, you have certain advantages that are built into the system that you don't even necessarily, most white people, I would argue, are not even conscious of, right? So stats like stop and frisk, right? That most of those incidents are happening on black and brown kids. But we know that drug use, drug dealing is actually happens more in white communities, right? Things that create our culture, and it dates back to slavery, right? And naturalization laws about who's white. So FDR's New Deal creates the suburbs, but only if you're white, right? You're not eligible for those loans if you're a person of color. So what that does then, whether you like it or not, it gives an advantage to white people. And that's what I think we mean, I know we mean when we say white privilege. It's the structural things, structural advantages that you can't get away from being perceived as white.
But in today's world, wouldn't it be called bullying your way through to get what you think you want and how you want to get it?
If you want to call it bullying, I have no problem with that. Yeah.
And I'll add on to that. The one thing I will say about using the language of sort of bullying your way through is that I think white privilege,
I think white privilege operates in two different ways. It operates in that active way of, yes, taking advantages of the ways that we have access, but I think one of the more insidious aspects of it are the ways that, as you noticed, a lot of white folks don't even recognize that they have it. You know, it conceals itself from those of us who have it. And so it's not only just bullying our way through in that sort of active sense, but it's also just sitting back and doing nothing and letting the privileges come our way, right? And because bullying sort of implies that we are kind of muscling our way in, which we are doing. But that there's also one more aspect to it, which is that we literally do not have to bully. We can just sit back and relax, and it happens for us. You know, and so I think that's the only thing I would add on to what you were saying around that.
There's two hands here, and so, yes, there's one question, and then, yeah, if you, as I'm moderating this, you have to make big hands or assist in somebody. So I will not get to everybody because we have a limited amount of time, but there's one hand over here, and then there's one hand, and then two, and then three. So, okay.
Thank you for having that conversation. I appreciate this forum dealing with the topic. I did get here a little late, so I'm kind of frame my thoughts around coming a little late. But in relationship to the Harlem Shake situation, and then actually even utilizing the term white privilege around that, you know, I myself have a little issue with the term white privilege because it must say something about you as a black male or black female if you're even using the term white privilege about your own self-esteem or even about your own ability to create and communicate your culture. So for example, we all know that the Harlem Shake situation was manufactured. It wasn't anything in reference to the original dance or any kind of cultural thing that happens in Harlem as somebody who used to live there. And black people just sat and watched this go down without even checking it, if you will. So I think white privilege actually manifests itself because black people are complacent. And so the minute you have an uprising, whether that be in your mental, physical, or spiritual self, and you start to actually feel that you're just as human as anybody else, then the whole theme of white privilege really doesn't get a chance to permeate. So I think we have a lot to do, discussions in the black community about this specifically, in relationship to our own inner consciousness and maybe the beat down that we get every day in the media, and the cultural messages that happen, and you know, just our state of mind right now. So I think in relationship to this whole situation with the Harlem Shake, hopefully we will see an uprising of black culture controlled, manipulated, and communicated and authenticated by black people. So then we can all benefit from each other in terms of how we express each other's humanity together.
Don wanted to say something right quick?
Just to that, like I think like the whole idea of white privilege, I was about to say that white privilege has nothing to do with me as a black person, because white privilege would exist if all black people left, right? Like it's about the structures that we are dealing with. And when we think about all types of privilege, I mean, there's other types of privilege that we have to deal with, right? So we think about class privilege. Like the fact that we're having this discussion using Skype and in this forum on an institution of higher education's campus is a sense of privilege, right? And so when people say, you know, how come other people in Harlem weren't holding forums and doing stuff like that, people have other stuff to worry about, right? And so we talk about these issues of, you know, the stuff that's going on in schools, the stuff that's going on in homes and stuff like that. Some people don't have time to take away and be worried about a dance. And so a lot of times it's those of us with the privilege who have the time to sit back and discuss these issues. And I think that's important for us to understand, like when we have these discussions, understanding that we have the privilege to have these discussions. We have the privilege to call forums and stuff like that about the people. But a lot of times if we don't see the people rising in masses, I mean, there's a reason behind that. One, because they don't necessarily have that space, but also because these images that are being portrayed is shaping the minds of the youth that are seeing these, right? Brother Dan talked about how he comes from a household, strong household, and his young daughter is saying that this is what I think a wife is supposed to be. When we think about the constant images that are placed on television, one, telling us what women are supposed to be, telling us how we're supposed to be as an authentic black male, all of that shapes the minds of people, and then that determines the type of reactions that we're going to have to different forums like this. Some people actually believe that the people that are represented in the media are who they are, and that's where the problem is.
Thank you so much. There's a hand here, here, and then in the back. So we'll go with the female. Oh, did you want to say something, Keith?
Yeah, but okay, so
Could you wait for the mic?
So I'll just try to make this quick. So like a lot of the friends that I grew up with, right, believed in patterns, right? They believed so much in patterns that that stopped them from recognizing their own